I had no intention of attending that family get-together. I had just finished working a night shift on a sweltering Sunday in late June. I just wanted to lie down on the couch with a blanket and be quiet because my eyes were heavy and my body hurt. Mom, however, insisted. She did it every time. She claimed everyone will be there. Avoid being the odd one out once more. So I went. With my typical mixture of shame and emotionless obligation, I took a shower, put on my least wrinkled shirt, and drove the 45 minutes to their house. I didn't anticipate a lavish greeting. I never received one. However, I also didn't anticipate what that day would bring. My parents, my brother Jason, his girlfriend, a couple of cousins I hardly knew, and even a few neighbors were all gathered in the backyard when I pulled up the driveway. There was a Bluetooth speaker playing music. The grill was in operation. Laughter could be heard nearby, and nobody came by to say hello. Mom had requested I bring something sweet, so I stood there for a moment with a plate of lemon bars. I had prepared and wondered if I should simply turn around. Jason then raised his head. He looked away after our eyes met. As simple as that. I located a place beside the fence, close to the patio's edge. Placing the dish down, I awkwardly hovered while pretending to scroll through my phone. Nobody greeted me, not even my mom. If I claimed that I wasn't accustomed to it, I would be lying. I was the invisible youngster, the fallback, the nice female who didn't start any arguments, the one who never needed saving, always had her own transportation, and paid her own expenses. Conversely, Jason was the golden boy, after having failed twice at college. He was apprehended for pilfering from Grandma's jewelry box. Despite 5 stints in treatment and 3 arrests, they consistently found a way to forgive him and support him. Please pardon him. Me? There was quiet. I sat on a patio chair off to the side and prepared a dish of food. Jason was talking loudly about new opportunities with his girlfriend. He was discussing house flipping. I refrained from rolling my eyes. Then it took place. That was the moment that made all the difference. "To new beginnings," said Jason as he got to his feet and held out his drink. "I finally paid off that loan." There was applause, laughter. "You're a lucky man." My dad even commented as he gave him a pat on the back. Mid-bite, I froze. Indebtedness? Jason? From his back? As of the last time I heard, he owed a loan shark about $80,000. 3 months earlier, Mom had been crying to me about it, claimed that the collectors were approaching their door, claimed to be terrified, that everything would be lost. I had given her money, thousands. I saved as much as I could spare. As if an enormous weight had just been removed, I watched them embrace, toast, and smile. Then Mom approached and said, "Sweetheart, can we talk later?" Without making eye contact. I have to explain something. I felt sick to my stomach. Later arrived in a flash. Too soon. Mom dragged me into the kitchen once everyone had finished eating. She had a tight face, tense. As usual when she was concealing anything, she fidgeted with her wedding ring. She started, "I know this might sound a little abrupt, but the house you've been living in," I blinked. "How about it? It has been sold." My heart stopped beating. "What?" "Remember, the deed was still in our name back in your college days. After we delivered it to you, you never altered it. The mortgage is paid by me. I've completely remodeled the space. Yes, I am aware." She gently caressed my arm as if I were a child, but we had to move quickly. Jason was in a big mess, the kind that might have caused harm to all of us. I was having trouble breathing. "I murmured that you sold my house. There was nothing we could do," she continued, her voice breaking. I gave her the impression that I had never seen her before. Not after she failed to remember my birthday for 3 consecutive years. Not when she advised me to avoid handling family money when Jason was driving a brand new automobile that I knew he didn't make. "You don't understand, he's just fragile," she added. Now though, I honestly didn't recognize the woman in front of me at this point. "I took a step back," I responded. "You didn't even ask me." "Not enough time," I yelled. "There's always time." "You simply didn't think I was important enough." I didn't hold off till she responded. Jason was lighting a cigar with my father and smiling like a lottery winner as I passed him. I didn't bid them farewell. Not even the lemon bars were taken by me. I lay in the living room of my former house that night. I sat quietly and gazed at the shelves I had constructed, the walls I had painted, and the little plants I had kept on the windowsills. I also started crying. For the money, they cried. They shed tears for the treachery they had experienced, wept over the years of putting forth so much effort to be the daughter they desired. She was the one they trusted, the useful one, the one who never refused. And they only regarded me as a weakness. They saw me as a safety net, a remedy for a problem I didn't create. I didn't get any sleep that evening. I simply kept repeating what Mom had said. There was nothing we could do. However, they did. They also picked him, once more. And that's when I realized I needed to take action. I wish I could claim that the first time I ever felt like the undesired child was when I was standing in the kitchen and realized my parents had once again picked my brother over me. However, it wasn't. That wasn't even the worst part. Like water wearing down stone, that distinction was part of a long series of smaller heartbreaks that had gradually eroded me over the years. The symptoms were always there, if I may be honest. I simply refused to trust them. The second child was me, the silent one, the individual who adhered to the rules, made minimal requests, and achieved high grades. Jason, my brother? The firework was his. The boisterous, untamed child who destroyed windows, crashed motorcycles, and charmed his way out of trouble with his puppy dog eyes and crooked smile. It began modestly. I recall Dad taking my allowance money straight out of my sock drawer when we were kids. My parents remarked, "He's just a boy," when I told them, "Be less sensitive." I saw my mother sob in secret when he got into problems in high school drinking, skipping class, even getting caught shoplifting and then prepare his favorite meal as if nothing had happened. Jason generally received a pat on the back and a "don't let it happen again" son after my dad took him out back and gave him the chat. It was me who did the dishwashing in silence, who became adept at tiptoeing, who told me things I shouldn't have known, like how they used my college money to bail him out of juvenile court. The information never reached me. Only after applying for scholarships and receiving word from the financial aid office that there were no monies remaining in my name did I learn about this. I didn't confront them, though. I simply got a job, then another, and then a third. While Jason partied into his 20s, I worked as a waiter throughout college. He attempted to lure me into pyramid schemes, fraudulent companies, and schemes that promised quick riches. It didn't seem to matter that he never had a job for more than 6 months. My parents were usually the ones who were willing to give him another chance. They repeatedly paid his rent, purchased an automobile for him, paid his DUI attorney's expenses. Most of these revelations came to light after the event. "He's not like you," Mom would sigh when I asked her why. "He requires additional assistance." That line turned into a silent foe of mine. He requires additional assistance. And me? The support was me. They didn't offer assistance even when I bought my house, well, our house, technically, because the deed was still in their name. For years, I had saved every cent. I had postponed vacations, sold furniture, taken on weekend gigs, and taken on freelance work. I can still clearly recall the day I signed the mortgage documents. After that, I sobbed in the car not because I was happy, but because I was tired. It was mine, even though it wasn't a mansion. Or so I believed. Every wall was painted by me. YouTube taught me how to tile a backsplash. I grew herbs on the windowsill for cooking. Hosted friends for quaint meals with candles I couldn't afford, but nonetheless bought and mismatched seats. That tiny home served as my haven. I felt like I was creating something for myself here, the only place in the world. Secure, steady, untouchable. So far. I started tugging at threads after the cookout. Without seeing my mother's face and hearing Jason's arrogant chuckle, I was unable to fall asleep. I needed answers about everything, not just the house. I asked for records pertaining to public property. After 2 days of searching, I finally found a signed document from 2 months prior. We sold the residence for cash. There was no transfer of the mortgage. I didn't receive any notification. Their signatures were familiar to me. What went the deepest, though, the buyer's name, Jason, my sibling. The house had not just been sold. They had sold it to him for less than the market rate. And you know who had discreetly provided him with the funds to purchase it? My mother's account, into which I had transferred funds a few weeks earlier to assist with their bill payment. was the source of this private transaction. My mouth was dry as I gazed at the TV. My money had been spent. It was used to purchase my home, in order for my brother to receive it. I shut down my laptop and sat still. Something inside of me wants to shout, to march there and make demands. The larger, calmer, colder section, however, sensed something very different: clarity. I had attempted to win their love for all these years, their consent. I followed instructions. I was helpful. I donated. I said nothing. And in exchange, they gave the one person who had never earned anything in his life what I had created and treasured. However, I refused to swallow it this time. I would no longer be the good daughter. I was silent long enough. It was supposed to be different this time. When I saw those documents, something changed inside of me. However, it wasn't anger that took hold. In my heart, it felt more like a door softly closing, a final admission that I was no longer a part of the same equation, that I had always been the variable that no one could rely on. Nobody was respectful. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. I didn't even give them a call. Rather, I stood up, poured myself a cup of tea with hardly trembling hands, and gazed out the window of my former living room. I briefly saw the warm golden light that always stretches over the floor as it strikes the bookcase that I constructed myself. I had grown up in that room. When no one else did, it had witnessed my tears, and it was no longer mine. But if a lifetime of being ignored had taught me anything, it was how to remain composed under duress. So I began recording everything. I made a backup of all the money I had transferred to my mother's account over the previous 12 months. I threw away voicemails, messages, and emails. I printed the sale price, the signatures, and the deed transfer. I recorded the dates. Under yet another guise, I even contacted the notary on file and made an appointment for a private meeting. When I arrived, I politely inquired, learning that my parents had arrived alone and had witnessed the sale. Don't bring me up. Regarding my occupancy status, there is no doubt. They hadn't simply sold the house without telling me. They had completely removed me from the narrative. Next, I called a lawyer. I met someone through a reliable friend, Colleen, who didn't bat an eyelid when I told her what was going on, but she wasn't the kind my parents would have known. I've seen people robbed by their own blood before, she replied coolly as she looked over my documents. She simply referred to it as theft. The term she used was financial abuse. The term financial abuse refers to the misuse of the money. She questioned if I had evidence that the sale was financed with my money. I had everything. Colleen's smile was not warm. They assumed you wouldn't defend yourself. Let's prove they were mistaken. I took a deeper breath than I had in weeks when I left her office. Things were tight back home. One day, Jason dropped by without warning. Using the extra key they had ostensibly forgotten to return, he gained entry. He carried himself as though he owned the area, because, well, he believed he did. He tossed his keys on the bar and remarked, "Looks different than I remember. That wall might be torn down." You know, open concept? I didn't answer. I spoke in a neutral tone when I did. "You must go." He blinked. "What? You must go," I said. "Right now." He chuckled briefly. "Don't be like that, please. Your parents told you to calm down." No matter how many people he brought down with him, my parents had always tried to save this guy, and I stared at him, really looked at him. The one who lost his money on gambling, the one who crashed his drunken car and blamed the fog, the man who broke things and never once said he was sorry. "Don't you feel like you've won?" Quietly, I asked. For a moment, he appeared perplexed. "What are you discussing?" I moved forward a step. "You believe you own this house. You believe that they handed it to you, and that concludes the matter." He arched an eyebrow. "It's in my name. That's what counts." I didn't wince. "Consider checking your account. Inquire about the money with Mom. Check to see if she mentions its origin." The slightest flinch went over his face. I went on, calm and unflinching. "Ask her why she suddenly had enough money to pay you out of pocket. After that, you could wonder where she got it." His mouth clenched as he stood there, suddenly uncertain. "Get out," I said, lowering and firming my voice. He went out. There was a crisp, satisfying quiet afterwards. I kept my actions a secret from everyone else. I made a deliberate move. I formally complained to the state real estate board about it. Even though the title had officially been in their name, my name had theoretically been added to the original purchase as a silent co-owner, so I filed my paperwork of elder financial exploitation. I sued my parents separately, alleging breach of trust, falsified consent, and improper use of cash. At first, it felt weird. Not quite. Then I remembered all the years I had gone out of my way for them. My forgiveness of the loans. When Jason lost everything again, I worked double shifts on his birthdays just to give money. And I recalled the expression on my mother's face when I asked her about the house sale. As if I were exaggerating. The guilt began to lessen at that point. At that moment, I began to experience the icy clarity I suppose my brother always experiences. Detached. Calculated. I had no desire for vengeance. I want repair. I also intended to obtain it. They had abandoned me, deceived me, and taken from me. However, they were unaware that I had already begun to construct a case. The family had learned to ignore me unless they wanted something, so I moved like a shadow in the days that followed, quiet, concentrated, and unseen. I quit the chat in the family group. There was no farewell or explanation given, just a quiet departure. I stopped making monthly auto payments to my parents' account, which they had always disguised as assisting with household chores or groceries. Of course, I no longer owned the house. I then got to work packing. Slowly, one box at a time is being processed. There was no drama and no hurry. I wasn't running away. I was taking back command. I kept the fact that I had already rented a modest flat with tall windows, a sturdy lock, and no ghosts a few neighborhoods away a secret. I used a different bank account that I had formed months before specifically for myself, signed the lease in my legal name, and kept it quiet. I now do whatever I do with purpose. However, my absence wasn't ignored for very long. My mother sent the first message. I haven't heard from you in a few days, sweetie. Are you all right? I didn't respond. Jason's next one. Hey, are you angry or what? I wasn't trying to be critical of the house. You believed that it wasn't truly yours. I looked at that one for a while. It was almost comical how daring they were. I didn't answer. Then my father called. I allowed it to ring. He called again. He called again and again. I saw the calls coming in, each one shorter than the one before, as if he was gradually coming to terms with the fact that I wasn't simply pouting I was gone. They arrived at the end of the week. Their SUV pulled into the driveway as I was packing my final few belongings into my car. My mother was the first to go, wearing that too charming tone and a frightened smile when she needed something. Tight-lipped and with his arms crossed, my dad trailed behind. Jason wasn't present. Coward. Could we enter? She inquired, only to converse. I shut the trunk. No. She blinked as if that response had surprised her. No, what do you mean? No, I mean. It was you who sold this house. I no longer call it home. You've stated that rather clearly. I ignored Dad as he murmured something beneath his breath. Mom took a step forward. We were surprised by your response. You've always been so calm. My jaw tightened as I heard the word. Calmly, I said. You bought a house you stole from me with the money I gave you. Then, as if he had earned it, you gave it to Jason. That's unfair, my father yelled. He was having problems. He needed our assistance. And I wasn't? I inquired back when I worked 60-hour weeks, when I saved every penny and postponed vacations to support you. When I got home and discovered without a word that the house I had made my life in had been sold, they didn't respond. I opened the car door. My lawyer will be speaking with you. Their faces transformed at that point. The worry disappeared. The guilt became more abrasive. Mom said you wouldn't do that. You're not that way. I climbed into the seat and murmured, You're right. I wasn't. But the best taught me. I then took off in my car. I sat in my new apartment that evening. It was mine, yet it still had the scent of new paint and someone else's memories. All mine, all mine. I brewed a cup of tea and sat down with my phone in the empty living room. A new email appeared on the screen from my attorney, Colleen. Subject, update on the discovery request. She had discovered something. Transaction records were attached. Huge amounts. I withdrew the funds from my personal accounts and transferred them to a joint account with Jason and my mother. The dates coincided precisely with the house's sale. There was no denying it. The house wasn't merely taken by them. They had borrowed against it under my name, sold it, and transferred the proceeds to pay off Jason's bills. This was all done without my consent. Under my digital signature, several of the transfers even displayed fraudulent authorization. Everything altered as a result. Colleen received a message from me. "Is that sufficient for a fraud case?" "More than enough," she answered. "You are no longer merely suing, you're making accusations." Retaliation didn't feel like it. It was anything but retaliatory. It had the feel of survival. They had misjudged me. Once more, they had interpreted my politeness as consent and my quiet as weakness. However, I was no longer that girl. I began going to the courthouse. I filed motions, signing affidavits. Every page I signed was a proclamation that I no longer had the right to tell my tale, and each paper I signed felt like another fragment of my past slipping away. I didn't raise my voice. I never texted in rage. I refrained from disparaging them in front of my extended family. I didn't use Facebook to publish mysterious messages. Rather, I let the law do the talking. I let the shouting be done by the bank statements. I let the fake documents shout louder than I ever could. They didn't have to apologize to me. Accountability was what I desired. I was on the verge of obtaining it. They believed they could utilize my name without ever being held accountable. But I had had enough of being used as a scapegoat. They claimed that the truth will free you, but they failed to mention that it will first destroy you. I believed I had experienced every kind of betrayal a family could offer. But when you face your parents and see them flinch not from remorse, but from fear of the consequences, it's a different kind of pain. No amount of motivational podcasts or therapy quotes can prepare you for this acute, clear anguish. I was still at ease. From that point on, every action was deliberate, chilly, and measured. Because I had evidence now, the date of the court was set. I anticipated a furor when I served them with the formal fraud complaint, which included proof of fraudulent documents, illegal banking, and abuse of power of attorney. I received quiet instead, which was scarier, to be honest. Nevertheless, the storm arrived quickly. It was Jason who exploded first. At 2:03 in the morning, he gave me a call. Specifically, 5 missed calls and a voicemail that began calmly, but soon descended into slurred accusations were waiting for me when I woke up. "Do you believe you are so morally upright? Are you sure you want to proceed with taking your parents to court, considering all they have done for you? You have always been self-centered." After pausing to get his breath, he continued, "You are no longer even related." I'd rather not acknowledge how long that final line reverberated. However, I didn't answer. I didn't even save the voicemail. For the record, I just sent it to Colleen. My mother appeared outside my flat a few days later. As if we were still playing home, she stood there with a plate of her well-known lemon bars without knocking. I allowed her in, but I kept the door open. "We're family, sweetheart," she said. "Is the involvement of attorneys really necessary?" I gazed at her while the tray of lemon bars shook in her hands, appearing to be a gesture of goodwill from a woman who had never really expressed regret for anything. I whispered, "You used my name. You sold the house I labored for. You falsified records. You told a lie. You gave Jason everything and acted as though I wouldn't notice. Therefore, the involvement of lawyers is necessary." Like muscle memory, she blinked quickly as the tears started to form. "I didn't wish to cause you any harm. I clarified that you simply wanted me to be silent. You expected it." I took a step back and shut the door softly in her direction. The following week was a haze of paperwork, depositions, and family rumors. My dad's sister, my aunt, had been skeptical for some time, it turned out. She contacted me after noticing my name appear in the property transfer documents. "Have you consented to sell the home?" With anxiety, she inquired. I told her everything. Additionally, someone from the family mentioned something I had never heard before for the first time in my adult life. "This wasn't fair to you." "I'm so sorry." She trembled when she spoke. Mine didn't. I had to be steady now. The family group discussion followed. Curiosity overcame me, even though I hadn't looked at it since the day I left. I read through hundreds of letters, most of which were ambiguous, passive-aggressive allusions to unfaithful kids who lose their roots or adults who flaunt their private affairs. Then it was Jason, of course, sent this. "She believes that suing us will make her life better." Joke on her. The fact that I'm still the favorite makes her envious. I sent my lawyer a screenshot that I had taken. After that, I left the group chat. Indefinitely. The court case itself quickly gained traction. My attorney was meticulous. The paperwork was flawless. My parents, who were obviously in a panic, attempted to blame the bank and blame administrative mistakes and uncertainty. However, the electronic signature they faked? The IP address corresponded to the network at home. Before it ever began, it was finished. Their attorney came to me with a settlement offer that included sealed records, no admission of guilt, and partial restitution. I declined. I wanted their actions to be documented. I wanted others to know. And the last blow arrived as they were getting ready for the trial. They had attempted to eliminate Jason's gambling debt with my house, but it had gotten worse. The creditor, a private lender, had filed a lawsuit. They also had nowhere to go because they didn't have my house as collateral. The irony struck then. In an attempt to save Jason, they had deceived me, but Jason was unable to save himself. I sat across from them in court. Mom, with her red-rimmed eyes, was dressed in a dark blazer. Dad had his arms crossed and his jaw clenched. Jason was too busy hiding from his own catastrophe to show up. It didn't feel like victory as the court read the decision, which included assets frozen, reparations demanded, and fraud confirmed. Not initially. There seemed to be no sound, as if you've been holding your breath for years and now your balloon is deflating. But then I saw my mother's face when I looked up. Don't be angry. I have no regrets. Simply incredulity. As if she had truly believed that this day would never arrive, and I understood that I had won. They stopped considering me weak at that point. Since I refrained from screaming, I didn't plead. I didn't request love. I refused to back down. I was honest. Finally, the system paid attention. I didn't turn around as I walked out of the courthouse. Dramatic remarks were absent. There were no tears shed during the embraces, no last-ditch efforts at reconciliation. Just myself, my attorney, and the documents proving I wasn't just a scapegoat for the family. I had finished serving as their fallback option. I had had enough of their silence. They believed I was too silent to defend myself. They were unaware that I had spent years organizing my getaway. I assumed it would feel louder to win in court. I might weep. I might chuckle. I might feel seen at last. What caught me off guard, though, was the silence. I sat by myself drinking coffee in my small kitchen the morning after the ruling. Not champagne. There are no calls for victory. There was no occasion for a celebratory meal. Just a calm that I hadn't experienced in years. It was a strange feeling, and yet strangely reassuring. My family's lies were no longer something I had to skirt. I owed them no more justifications. I no longer had to plead for the space that was rightfully mine. However, like smoke after a fire, the emotional fallout continued to linger even after the legal dust had settled. It's heavy in the air but invisible. The phone calls caught me off guard, from folks I hadn't spoken to in a long time. A few family members, some of the family's old friends, a few neighbors. They're all skirting the truth, saying stuff like, "I had no idea it was so serious. I assumed you were close to your folks." The family situation is very tragic, sad. That term kept coming up as if I had destroyed some delicate illusion. I wanted to express how depressing it was for me to continue trying to earn affection that ought to have come naturally. I didn't argue, though. I didn't elaborate. I just remarked, "Thanks for checking in, and let the discussions end there." I had lost all interest in self-defense. Because the longer I was apart from them, the more I understood how profound their deception was. Consider Jason, my brother. He was more than a mere gambler. He was an expert at deflecting. For years, the family would focus on me whenever he made a mistake. "You never come often enough. You're too delicate. Why don't you emulate your brother more? He's constantly there." He was, of course. He required them. He put them to use. They also permitted him. However, I was the one who was on my own. I was the reliable individual. When things fell apart, they relied on the strong one. And when I was no longer needed by them, they accused me of moving away. It took losing everything for me to realize how twisted the cycle was. I began going to therapy. Furthermore, I won't claim that everything was resolved right away. However, it was comforting in its own quiet way to sit across from someone who had no interest in the dysfunction in my family. Someone who just stated, "What happened to you? It's not okay. On certain days, I would cry in the middle of a sentence. There were times when I sat in quiet, unable to express how empty it felt to know that your parents loved the concept of you more than the real you. On certain days, I was upset with myself. I'm upset that I didn't notice it sooner. I'm upset because they sent birthday presents even after they forgot mine. Irate for attending every family BBQ, graduation, and hospital visit in the hopes that things would be different each time, only to be served paper plates and plastic forks, while Jason was served wine in crystal glasses. However, there were also times when I felt proud. Proud of the woman who didn't flinch when standing in court. I'm proud of the girl who grew up to stand up for herself after having dinner in her room since no one had reserved a spot for her. I'm proud of the me who remained composed while her mother sobbed on the porch and begged her to simply let it go. No, not now. If I had let it go, I would have betrayed myself once more. And I had done enough for the rest of my life. Around this time, I got back in touch with Aaron, a college friend. He had seen my tale posted online by a legal advocacy group, but we were merely friends at the time and never really got along. He sent me a brief note that said, "I read your story, but you don't know me well. It was brave of you to do it. I simply wanted to express that. Previously, I would have dismissed such a message. However, there was something honest in its simplicity." So I answered. 2 messages were sent. 2 became coffee. As the sun sank below the trees, coffee morphed into hours of strolling and conversing in a park. I was never asked to recount everything by him. When I decided to share, he simply listened. And when I didn't, he relaxed and allowed the quiet to permeate the room. That was something new. Being in the presence of someone who didn't require any proof from me. Someone who didn't make an effort to correct me, humiliate me, or explain the complexity of families. He simply sat in the muck with me, and he gave me room to breathe by doing that. I began to regain little things gradually. I painted my apartment a new color. The locks were changed. Anything that made me think of the house they stole was donated. Since the court decision, the family group chat had been silent nonetheless, so I stopped checking it and finally stopped using it completely. Jason was blocked by me, not angry, but because I came to the realization that I no longer needed to know what drama he was engulfing himself in. I didn't have to bear that burden. My phone number has changed. I established new habits. Walks in the morning. I prepared food for myself. Rereading. My therapist even suggested that I start journaling, and one night I penned a single sentence that made my eyes water and my chest hurt. My family didn't know how to love me, but I made it through. Not that I wasn't lovable. However, they never bothered to find out how. I still managed to learn to love myself somehow. Not all at once, not flawlessly, but enough to get to your feet, enough to leave. Sufficient to say, no more. My peace was that. I had that power. What was mine was taken. However, they couldn't accept me for who I am. I still occasionally see them. In the supermarket. During a wedding. On the other side of a busy Christmas street. My folks. My sibling. My heir was once determined by these folks. We don't talk. Not at all. People nod. Yes, I do remember who you are, but I no longer know you. That's the type of aloof recognition. And truthfully, that's sufficient. Since my anger has subsided, I do not wake up feeling betrayed. I don't spend my days mentally reliving previous exchanges in an attempt to pinpoint the turning point. I no longer question whether they ever showed me true love. The true question, in my opinion, was whether I ever loved myself enough to no longer require their approval. And I do now. They sold that house? I never returned. I hoped to drive past it one last time once the court decided in my favor and the money was returned. I thought I would park on the other side of the street and gaze at the window where I used to watch thunderstorms come in, or the porch where I used to read books as a child. However, I didn't. I didn't have to, because at last I realized that a house is merely a building. A home is something you create for yourself. I decided to make a fresh start somewhere. I relocated to a little area next to a lake 2 towns away. Calm, quiet. It was simple and unadorned. It was mine, though. All of the bills, keys, and bricks are in my name and only my name. No secret signatures. No treachery is concealed under a mantle portrait of the family. Only room. My personal area, I began working as a freelancer, largely doing graphic design work, and gradually I started getting clients. These clients were sufficient to cover my expenses, enough that each time I hit send on an invoice with my name at the top, I felt proud. Aaron is still alive. We are not in a hurry. However, he is a constant presence. Nice. In every way I didn't realize I needed, gentle. We watched the sun set into the water while enjoying takeout on our laps by the lake one evening. I told him everything. I shared both the positive and the negative aspects of my story with him, the bits where my voice still trembled, and he didn't flinch when I eventually stopped, terrified of what he may say. They don't define your worth, he added, simply reaching for my hand. You do. I don't believe I've ever heard that before. Not without restrictions. That evening, I shed tears. Not from suffering, though. Out of relief. From being secure in my own narrative. Healing doesn't necessarily resemble a dramatic rebirth, you see. It can seem like waking up without a sense of dread in your chest at times. It can sometimes feel like preparing a peaceful meal, singing to yourself, and understanding that you're not alone, you're at last free. I pardoned them, not because they expressed regret. They didn't. Not because they were altered. They haven't. But because I'm not going to spend the rest of my life bearing their shame. My forgiveness is a freedom I granted myself, not a gift to others. A method to end the book without requiring a cosign for the final chapter. What about Jason? Last month, he made an attempt to get in touch. A voicemail, slurred words. It has to do with beginning anew. Something about our familial ties. I didn't return the call. Because I've come to realize that family isn't about genetics. It has to do with honor. Show respect. Have faith. And blood becomes merely a coincidence if those elements are absent. Now I have a new family. Friends who support me without feeling envious. I have clients who compliment me and consistently make their payments on schedule. I have a neighbor who regularly visits to check on my pet's well-being while I'm away. Aaron never asks for more than I'm prepared to give, and always makes tea the way I like it. Family is that. Love is that. And I wish I could go back in time to that younger me, the girl who waited for thank yous that never materialized, who bought groceries for a place she was not permitted to call home, and who worked double shifts to support her parents and say, they will eventually take what is rightfully yours, but you will reclaim yourself. Because I did just that. I won more than simply a lawsuit. I raised my voice again. My time. My limits. I'm at peace, and I can never get that back from anyone, not even my parents. Therefore, if you've ever felt alienated inside your own family, if you've ever kept quiet to maintain harmony only to become lost in the calm, if you've ever gone to such extreme lengths to win someone's love that you lost your sense of self-worth, then pay attention to what I have to say. You're worthy of more. You did it every time. And sometimes the best form of retaliation isn't bragging about your value. You're living your life as usual. In its entirety, in tranquility, in charge.